Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Williams, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Why are we going to have a great show for you today? Because that's what we do. That's what we do. We want to have a great show as usual for you. But you know what? Before I get started with the show, I want to have a shout out, really, for women, and it's a statement made by what's her name, KCDC. Her real name is KC Hunt from MSNBC. You know, all the men were around the table. They were talking about all the picadillos with men and the problems that they're in, and, you know, talking about all these different senators or whatever that are in trouble. And KC Hunt said something that is prescient. And I tell you something else, my dear friends, right? Hermanas, hermanos, my brothers, my sisters, my friends. Maybe we should start looking into things like that. How many times all these scandals that we talk about is because we have a group of people, group of men specifically, that think they have carta blanca to do as they please, right? Isn't that what the case is? They think they have carte blanche to do as they please. Well, anyhow, listen to how Casey puts it. I thought it was kind of cute, so I said, you know what? I'm going to start the show. Before I even get into the show, let me just play this for everybody that's listening. Here you go.
Can I just say, character-wise, let's elect a woman, okay? These nonsense that's been coming from our male politicians of all parties. I don't know. I'm tired of it. You don't want to worry about character. Elect a woman, please. Thank you.
There it is. There it is. I've never understood why that in itself isn't a reform message, which is you don't see women governors getting into these scandals. You don't see women. Yeah,
Sure, I won't be accused of being sexist in the opposite direction, but the facts are what they are.
The facts are the facts.
The facts are what they are. The facts are what they are. Just elect a woman. I like the way she just kind of said it, matter of fact. Just go ahead and elect a woman. And you know what? Maybe we should start thinking seriously and wondering about that. Maybe that is all that we need to do. Well, not all that we need to do, but it is something that we need to get going. Anyhow, what's today's show gonna be about? Today I have a great guest. The guest his name is Ted Howard. And anybody in the grassroots movement understands who this guy is. This guy is a great guy. This guy is, how should I advertise about this guy? He's a guy that's in the collaborative movement, if you will. That is a movement of collectives, owning your own company, that sort of a thing, not least as possible dependency on, let's say, public corporations, that kind of stuff. And I tell you, when you listen to his message, and let me go into the show. Democracy, Collaborative President on Saving the Middle Class from an Economy Making You Poor. That's the title of our show today. Okay, that's the title of the show today. Ted Howard, president of the Democracy Collaborative, talks about how the middle class can survive the extractive nature of our economic system. The Democracy Collaborative's Ted Howard has been walking the grassroots path for a very long time. I interviewed him, who was the president and co-founder of the group, and it was a quite inspiring interview, right? It was so inspiring that it went over the time limit. The Democracy Collaborative outlines the 7 principles that will fix our economy. And Ted Howard and Marjorie Kelly, they wrote a book called The Making of a Democratic Economy, How to Build Prosperity for the Many, Not the Few. That explains the whole thing. So what I'm going to go and do is I'm going to go ahead and start this because the interview it's extensive. I'm going to start it. Then when we come back, there's some other stuff that we want to talk about. So let's just go ahead and get the interview started, and we'll be back with you guys thereafter. Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm here today with the one and only Ted Howard, who is president and co-founder of the Democracy Collaborative, and now he's also we know him as the author of several books, the author of several articles, but today he's here to talk to us not only about the economy, but about the making of a democratic economy. Ted Howard, welcome to Politics Done Right.
Thank you so much, Egberto. Real pleasure to be here. I'm honored.
Absolutely. So I'm honored to have you. First of all, I don't have the hard copy of your book. You know, I'm trying to save the forest, okay? But I know you have a hard copy. Why don't you show us what it looks like?
Yeah, let me just hold it up here. Oh, there we go.
The other side. Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's the book.
The making of a democratic economy.
Absolutely. But you know what, Howard, Ted, before we get into the book, I want to talk to you a little bit about the state of our economy. Generally speaking, how would you describe what we're living in right now?
Well, it depends who you ask. Now, if you ask the President of the United States, he points to, boy, stock market's never been higher, the gross domestic product's going through the roof, everything's grow. I saw him the other day. He said because of his tax cuts, people are just filled with cash in their pockets. Well, that's that view. Here's the view that I think is more realistic. 47% of the American public, our families, can't assemble $400 from their paychecks in order to meet a basic need they have, like maybe a kid breaks a leg, or their car breaks down, or their roof needs to be repaired. In the most productive economy in the history of the world, 47% of our people can't put together $400. Just three people in this country, and listeners will know their names well, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, own more wealth than the bottom 160 million of us. In other words, half the country has less wealth than 3 people. The concentration of wealth is becoming ever more greater. It's escalating. It's been particularly escalating since President Reagan in the early 1980s, and in the United Kingdom, Margaret Thatcher, with their what's called the neoliberal agenda. And so I would say that we have an economy, to quote Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel laureate economist, of, by, and for the 1%, and it's getting worse and worse. The wealth ownership pattern in this country is akin to what it was in medieval feudal Europe back in the 14th century. So that's the reality. I think we've got an economy that's very productive, but it extracts wealth from our economies and it centralizes it in fewer and fewer hands. And I think that's a tremendous jeopardy for the future of democracy as a principle in this country.
You know what is interesting, Ted? Earlier, I want to say 2 things first. Earlier today on my show on KPFT, I was talking about this same thing, about the economy growing at 2% while the wealthy grows at north of 7%. That means it's extractive. You can only have the wealthy grow at a larger rate than the economy if they are taken away from everybody else. That's a mathematical fact. Now, I spoke to a caller today, and he said he looked around where he lives, and everything looked fine. So to him, the urgency with which I was talking was a bit too urgent, if you know what I mean. In other words, right now, a lot of people don't see the dire straits that we're in because they aren't specifically right there, but they don't quite understand that they're there. My question is, How are we going to get them to realize that Dr. Richard Wolff, I'm pretty sure you're aware of who he is,
Yep.
he really taught me something, not only in a couple interviews that I did with him, but in a speech that he gave where he showed that we used credit as a form of theft, wage theft in this country. And many people, because of the way it's done, they don't see it. So I'd like you to tie that together. How can we get people to understand the dire straits that they're really in based on the camouflage and the facade that they have on their own lives?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, because when you look at what's actually going on statistically, the fact that our middle class and our working class are being hollowed out, that, for instance, we cite in our book, The Making of a Democratic Economy, a public opinion poll that showed something like 70% of the American public, and that's a lot of Republicans too, 70% say the system is rigged against them and for the wealthy. In fact, I heard something on the news last night that figures up to something like 85%. So you kind of look at that, and you know, people are highly dissatisfied with a lot of what's going on in the country. And yet, you know, when you kind of look around, you know, the Walmarts are filled with lots of goods, and people are going in there and using their credit cards. And so I think what really needs to happen here is a couple of things. One, we need to, I don't know if you remember the film The Matrix.
Yes.
I see actually they're making Matrix 4, Keanu Reeves,
Yes.
like that. Well, the first one, which was the best one for sure, if you remember, everybody's living in this world, and it kind of looks wonderful out there, except it turns out in that science fiction dystopia, the machines are controlling everybody, and you know, it's all a facade. And if you don't take the red pill, you'll never know that you're living in this craziness. And so, in a sense, we're kind of living in that sort of country and economy, and we need to delegitimize this you know, this mythology that's taken.
Right.
And you know, so most people just buy the idea. There are all these bromides that we hear that are not at all related to the truth, but people, you know, it's been said enough by the corporations and the politicians, people come to believe them. So people think, well, as long as the big economy's growing, some of it's going to trickle down to the little guy and woman, you know, in most need. Well, it just doesn't, and the statistics show that. You hear, well, a rising tide will lift all boats, but not really. You hear, as long as the stock market's going up, we're all benefiting. But most people, even if they own a little bit of stock, it doesn't benefit them at all. It's the big institutional investor. And so it goes on and on. So the first thing I think we need to do is really come to terms with the emperor has no clothes. Or another harsher way to say it is we're all living in the matrix world, and we need to deplug from it. You know, the challenge we face, I think, Egberto, certainly there's a big challenge of giant concentrated corporate power, wealthy individuals standing in the way of really progressive economic change, away from what you've said, and we call in the book an extractive economy, toward a democratic economy, and we could talk about that. So these big forces are in the way, but I think, having done this work for decades, the biggest challenge we face is it's hard to imagine we could actually live in another kind of system.
Thank you. Yes.
You know, there's somebody said, I forget who, but it's one of my favorite quotes, that it's easier to imagine the end of our planet than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And that's really true.
I want to interrupt you for 1 second because, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That is what a caller today said. He said, you know, we know we're gone. You know, we can't change our current economic system. So let's pretty much appease. Let's just pretty much do the best we can. And my contention is, no, we can. I want to kind of turn the trend here a minute, because I gave an urgent to the listeners today, and it was because of something that I saw on Facebook. I saw a Trumpster arguing with another person. Rather, I saw two friends arguing. one who had Trumpster friends, okay? And the other person said, go ahead and unfriend me because I can't deal with the friends that you have. And I jumped into the discussion right away. I said, like, no, unfriend nobody. Unfriend nobody. We don't want that. First of all, it messes up with the algorithm because now it keeps you constantly in a silo, right? You only see things that you want to see, and that doesn't lend itself for the kind of work that you and I want to get accomplished, and that is for everybody to get together to go against the real enemy, if you will. So I said, don't do that. Go ahead and just assume the other person has a mental illness, and you wouldn't treat anybody badly who had a mental illness. You would be sympathetic towards them. You'll be empathetic towards them. Try that, because we have to communicate with each other. We have to continuously talk to each other, because if we are talking, we can look at the real problem. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's exactly right. You know, our organization, the co-founder of, is called the Democracy Collaborative. And part of the nature of this is we have got to be able to talk in a serious way based on facts and data about what's happening in our lives and what might be ways forward. This, I live in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And, it's a very interesting state. When Barack Obama first ran for president, Ohio voted for him. He carried Ohio. Second time Obama ran for president, reelected, carried Ohio. Trump comes along, Trump carried Ohio. And, what's happening is we're getting so, as they say on TV, so tribal and so disconnected from one another that this notion of what has made America a viable experiment. And it has tremendous flaws, and we, all the way back to the original sin of slavery of 400 years this month, through so many problems. But it's been a viable experiment because we've been able to grapple together with our problems and find a kind of civic purpose. And it's one of the things about the economy now. My co-author Marjorie Kelly and I like to talk about a moral economy. What are the values and principles of a really moral economy? But what has occurred is the economy has been so dislocated from the lives of people that it's all just data and forecasts and numbers. And we don't see that it's really about people. We've completely eliminated the human from the economy. So I agree with you. Rather than unfriend each other, what we need to do is start to get in a room and get really serious about what's happening. And, I think, our book is meant not only for those that are critics of the president, and I count myself among the most ardent critics, but for those who are supporters. Let's look and see, okay, you support this president. What have you got to say that since the Great Recession of a decade ago, 95% of all the income gains have gone to 1% of the people? We need to grapple with that. So I really think, to not go on and on, but, this idea that we live in a system and we kind of get trapped thinking we really can't get beyond it. You said their callers said, well, we need to appease them or whatever. But, Egberto, if you and I lived 3,000 years ago in Pharaoh's Egypt, which lasted like 2,000 years, I'm sure we would think, the world will always have pyramids and sphinxes and pharaohs. Or if we lived in the Middle Ages, there's always going to be the church and the king, and all the rest of us will be peasants and serfs. And now we study all that in the history books. And so what we're talking about is actually how do we move forward beyond this hyper casino capitalism that we live in into a new kind of economy. That's neither the old style Soviet state socialism bureaucracy that's highly undemocratic, nor this extractive concentrated capitalism that's also highly undemocratic. What's the alternative? And that's what we need to build together.
And that's your book, An Economy of, by, and for the people. So let's start there. You have it well organized in chapters. An economy of, by and for the people. By the way, folks, we're now talking about the making of a democratic economy by one and only Ted Howard, and he has a co-author, right?
Yes, Marjorie Kelly, who's just an extraordinary thought leader, has been working on issues such as democratic and employee ownership for decades. She's just a brilliant person. I ride on her coattails.
Well, great. I mean, you know what? We've been riding on women's coattails for a long time.
Amen.
Okay, so an economy of, let's talk about that chapter, an economy of and by the people. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, what we mean is, as I was saying, an economy that's really designed to serve people, not is disconnected from the lived experience of people. And what we do in this book, we've identified 7 principles of a democratic economy or a moral economy. And one of them is, that it's an economy of the people. Another is that community needs to be at the center of an economy. For instance, the large corporations now, the big multinationals, they don't really consider community to be important. They're global. They're kind of footloose. Their principle has been and continues to be to maximize the value of the shareholders' interests. And so, for them, a community is simply a place from which wealth can be extracted. It's not a place to really build. It's like, I live in Cleveland, Ohio. There are big corporations there, but they don't really care about Cleveland. If they can get a better deal and less taxes and fewer unions and all that by moving to Phoenix or moving to Mexico or moving to China, they'll go do it. And so these are the kinds of principles. Environmental sustainability is another principle of a democratic economy. Inclusion. The fact that those that as an economy grows, everyone needs to benefit from it rather than the way we do it now. Again, in Cleveland, where I live, about a third of the population lives below the federal poverty line. Yeah. So while the economy grows, it's leaving behind a third of the people, at least. And so these principles are at the heart of this book. But the thing I want to say, I'm not an economist. And I actually don't read many economics texts. I find them turgid and boring. So I want to say to people that don't worry if you don't know about economics, this can still be a book for you, because really what we're trying to do is change the narrative, the story around the economy.
And I noticed that's what you did in the book. You created individual stories of people in each of these 7 sequences.
That's exactly right. And we tell stories. And so, for instance, one of the stories is about Cleveland, Ohio, where I've helped about a decade ago to build a network of worker-owned cooperatives that are located in the lowest income neighborhoods in our city, intentionally hire people in the companies from those neighborhoods, pay living wage, family supporting salary, give very good health benefits, and also have profit sharing because the companies are owned by the workers in them. And the way they operate is they provide goods and services to the large, what we call anchor institutions, hospitals, universities, cultural centers that are in the city of Cleveland and don't get up and leave. And this is called the Evergreen Cooperative. And so we tell the story of the Evergreen Cooperative, not just from all the several hundred people that work in them, but from the eyes of one person who, when we first met him a decade ago, he was very entrepreneurial, but the entrepreneurship he had is he was selling hard drugs. Right. And he didn't go of it. And then he'd been incarcerated. And we brought him into the company. We made him an owner of the company. He was an extraordinary employee. And he learned the skills of work and everything. And now he's moved on to another kind of company. And it shows that, their way to create a business that is really people-centered, not just profit-centered.
Now, let me ask you something about that cooperative. Let me ask you something about that, because that worked. It worked, but when you start talking about employee ownership and cooperatives and so forth, the first hit you get in America is that is socialist, which it is, but they say it's socialist, right? And
Yeah.
the next question that comes up, and what's wrong? Is there something wrong with the mechanism that you just saw work?
Right. Well, so this socialism thing is very interesting. First, you know, I think Bernie Sanders has done a great service to America by calling himself a democratic socialist.
Yes,
You know,
yes, he has.
it's not very scary, and here's what it's about, and he's not shying away from it. But these labels are used, and of course the Republicans in this election are going to, you know, the Democrats could nominate the most conservative of the 20 people running,
Right.
and the Republicans are still going to call them socialists. But what does socialism in this sense mean? It means, it doesn't mean that the state, the national government,
Methods of production,
owns
right?
everything. It just means that we're advocating for broader ownership among different publics, if you will. So you know, employee ownership could sound sort of socialistic. On the other hand, this is mind-blowing to me. There are something like 8,000 companies and corporations in the United States that are employee-owned. In other words, the people in them, thousands of them are 100% owned by the workers. Sometimes they only own 20%, but they're employee-owned. There are more people, 10 million people now in America, who work in employee-owned companies that they own than are members of private sector unions.
Wow.
That's how things have changed. And, you know, that's 10 million people. And I'm telling you, these people are not all identifying as socialists, but
Right.
they like to work in a company where they have voice, participation, they share in the profits, they get to, like our evergreen cooperatives in Cleveland, the workers have democratic elections to elect some members to the board so that they participate. You know, this is, in a sense, this can be as American as apple pie. And one of the very funny things, I could send you a link sometime if you're interested.
Please do.
I have a quote from a political figure in the early 1980s, a long speech actually, going on and on about how the future of the American economy will be a future where the workers own the companies in which they work. And who said that? President Ronald Reagan. So if this is a left-wing socialist agenda, I guess we've got to say that President Reagan
Was a left-wing socialist. Well, you know, he was the one that said that he supported unions as well. He was the one, you know, so I mean, it's amazing the transition that we've made. Well, I mean, so what else in your book that we can talk about that you think, because you went ahead and called out just about every principle already, that the 7 principles.
Well, I think one of my 2 stories that are really very, very interesting to me. And one is this principle of community, really reinforcing community. I've been privileged over the last years to work with indigenous people, Native Americans, on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. And, you know, I was saying the poverty rate in Cleveland is about 33%, and the unemployment rate in low income communities is maybe 40%. It's very tough. But on the Pine Ridge Reservation, which is the home of the Oglala Sioux, you know, who were forced there at the end of the Indian Wars.
Right.
The unemployment rate there is always between 80 and 85%, if you can imagine that. So this is a place where people are in very dire circumstances, and yet they're tired. They're not waiting around for someone to do something. They've started, because they believe in their community, a group of young, very dynamic young Sioux leaders, men and women, have started what they call a regenerative community to build the sense of community for their people. They've got a piece of land that's 35 acres. They are building housing in the indigenous patterns and very environmental. They're starting to build light manufacturing that they'll own, their community will own, cultural centers, schools, and so forth. And the way they're building it is rather than go off the reservation and hire, a white construction company from Rapid City, 2 hours away to come down and build things. The Sioux have begun what they're calling a Native American worker-owned construction company.
Wow.
So they built their own cooperative to build their own community. And I think that's a beautiful story. The other story I'll tell you very quickly so I don't run on. I've been working in the United Kingdom, in England, with the Labour Party there. And of course, Jeremy Corbyn is, in a sense, a kind of version of Bernie Sanders.
Will he be Prime Minister?
As they say, inshallah, I hope so. It looks like there's going to be an election,
Yes.
maybe in October. And I think there's a very good chance that he will be the Prime Minister. And he has embraced what we call in the Democracy Collaborative community wealth building. It's really a way to build this democratic economy. And so we've worked with Labor Council members in City Council in a town called Preston, which is 150,000 people. It's an older industrial. We call it in the United States a Rust Belt city. And it was really flat on its back when I first went there 6 years ago. And what they've done is the city council said, again, no one's coming to save us. We have to do for ourselves in our community. And what they've done is they persuaded the local university, the local housing authorities, even the police force, to look at all the contracts for services and goods that they buy and notice which ones are going to France or going just to London, aren't creating economic value locally, and move those contracts back into the city. And so they've brought 70 million pounds, about $100 million of money that used to leave the system back into Preston. So that's Then they worked with the local unions and have accessed, I'll do this in dollars, about $125 million of public employee pension funds, which again used to leave Preston and now are being invested in Preston. They're building their own public bank so that they don't have to negotiate with the five big banks and the high interest rates, and they'll capitalize it with the reserves of the Lancashire County and the city of Preston. They're creating their own renewable energy company. The University of Central Lancashire has a new unit to incubate cooperatives, worker cooperatives. Anyway, so you've got this whole new democratic economy being born in this city that when this began, and this is the end of the story, when this began 6 years ago, Preston was listed in a government index of they call it the deprivation index, if you can believe that. Preston was listed in the bottom 20% of the most deprived cities in all of England. Earlier this year, there's a very radical socialist group you may have heard of, PricewaterhouseCoopers, did a study and listed the most improved communities in all of England. And Preston was rated by PricewaterhouseCoopers as the #1 most improved city for the residents of Preston. So what it shows is these principles, if they're really implemented, whether it's in Houston or Austin or Cleveland or Preston or, South Florida, wherever, if they're implemented with real intentionality, even in this crazy national political time, you can still build a resilient local economy on a democratic basis.
I think there's something very important that you're pointing out here that probably going to go over the head of a lot of people. This city was depressed. This city was not only depressed, but the capitalist model failed it. The capitalist model saw no value in it. People saw value in it, and they brought it back. In other words, all the capitalist companies, based on what you've just said, were extractive. They were taken out of this city. Even this dying city, they were taken out. The only difference you had is you removed those that were removing capital. You reinvested human capital, all that came from that community, into that community, and it sprung up. That is actually socialism. in a radically democratic form.
That's right. We
And
we call it building prosperity for the many, not just the few. But the way you need to do it to make it really stick is you need to broaden ownership over the capital and the economy. It can't just be good guy programs and initiatives. The issue, what defines any community, what defines any country is who owns the assets and gets to determine how those assets are used. And they have a new model for that in the city of Preston.
you know what, Ted? Interestingly, it's not new. There is an activist in, I don't remember what ghetto here in the United States called, I think his name was Roy Innis or something like that,
Yep.
that tried to implement ownership of these public buildings as well. And what they did notice with those experiments as well is the interest in the building, keeping the building up, doing things with the buildings made a difference.
Yes. Yeah, this whole issue of democratic or broader or socialized ownership it's not a new idea.
Right.
However, it's an idea that's getting a lot of traction right now. So, for instance, there is one public bank in the United States of America. It's
North Dakota, right?
North Dakota. So you've got a socialized bank that is controlled by the state government.
In a red state.
In one of the most conservative red states there is. When you look at what took place 10 years ago with the financial collapse and the Great Recession, as credit dried up all over the country because the banks, retrenched.
Right. Derivatives and the works, yes.
Exactly. In North Dakota, because you had a socialized bank, the state kept lending to small business, to people, families that wanted a mortgage, and kept the money flowing because they knew it would be in the interest of the state, of the people. And North Dakota weathered the recession better pretty much than any other state. But that model just celebrated several weeks ago its 100th birthday, and there had never been another public bank. But because of people now starting to examine what happened during the recession, there are 24 states in the United States, including big ones like California, that are doing feasibility studies to establish their own public bank. And there are a couple dozen cities doing the same thing. Santa Fe, New Mexico, Washington, D.C., all over. So this is a way for a community to control its capital and rather than being dictated to by the large banks.
Ted, what we need is exposure. What we need is exposure because everything that you just said, these are known entities, interestingly. The problem is, however, it is kept out of the eyes of many because it doesn't serve the corporate interest. So they don't want anybody to really get traction. North Dakota, a small state. California, those liberal wackos. But even a lot of folks in California and other places that we may consider, these are Democrats, they must be progressives. They're right within the tracks, which means they're bought as well.
Well, you're right. When you look at whether it's a conservative news outlet or a liberal news outlet like the New York Times, and you read about the economy, you do not read about this. You don't read about this ferment of experimentation, innovation. One of the myths that we have in our country is that public ownership is inefficient, doesn't work, and everything's just been privatized. Well, if you look at small communities all over the country, particularly in the South, you find communities of 10,000, 20, 50,000 people that the large telecommunication companies don't see there's enough profit to extract, so they won't go in and build broadband networks and cable networks and so forth. So the city governments, this is a new trend, have been doing this all over the South, and almost all of the mayors of these cities are Republicans. Yes. So, they're not socialists, but they think it makes a lot of sense that the city government, on behalf of the people, should own this asset, and it is in effect socialized. So You're quite right. What we need to do is, and we hope this book makes some contribution, is tell the story that there is within the architecture of the giant capitalism we live in. I firmly believe there is a fundamentally different and new economy that's being born, and we just need to keep advancing that growth and telling that story.
That is the closer. Ted Howard, president and co-founder of Democracy Collaborative, author of The Making of a Democratic Economy.
There it is.
Get that book. It was my pleasure to have you on Politics Done Right, sir. And I hope to see you again because we have so much more to talk about.
Thank you, Egberto. Very much appreciate it. And if you ever make it to the Midwest, come see us in Cleveland. I want to take you into the Evergreen Cooperatives and meet these extraordinary men and women that are demonstrating that working people can own their companies and make them profitable, productive, great places to work.
I'll be there.
Good enough. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Ted. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. I surely enjoyed that interview. I think that was a real substantive. Okay, where do we go from here? Right now, as it turns out, we are in the middle of the primaries, right? So there's a whole lot of everybody's fighting. Not fighting. They're putting out all their ideas to determine which and what will be the best ideas going forward. Now, last week sometime, actually I think it was last weekend, Donny Deutsch. Now, Donny Deutsch is not somebody that I care for too much. He's a Democratic strategist. He's also a marketing expert. And he's the guy who went on Morning Joe and said once that if Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren got elected or won the Democratic primary, he would vote for Donald Trump. Well, when he said that, immediately Joe Scarborough exactly understood what was happening there. Are you kidding me? I mean, nobody is as bad as Donald Trump, right? So he kind of pulled back from that. But altogether, he's been out there just beating up on anybody that didn't sound capitalistic enough. In other words, those of us that believe in having we believe in free enterprise. Nobody can argue with what we believe. Look, I've had my own company. A lot of the folks that we hang with had their own. We believe in free enterprise. What we don't believe in is the extractive nature of the economic system that we have today, which is a very dangerous thing. And, all you have to do is look at your own well-being. If you take a look at your own well-being, you can actually see that things are getting progressively worse. People have a semblance of having a lot. I mean, every so often you are the lucky one, you're the chosen one, and things turned out okay. But, Donny Deutsch has a program on MSNBC, and he made a great statement that I thought was very well said. And unfortunately, a lot of the folks around the table with him, they gave it a tepid laugh, they just could not, you could see from their expressions that they didn't really buy into what he was saying. Well, I tell you what, Donny Deutsch, somebody that I'm not fond of, somebody that I think is not the best thing for the Democratic Party, was right. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it up on the other side.
I think, and I want to just move into the next topic because it's related to this, I see the word assault, and I see assault weapons as a symbol to use. Let me go back and I'll come back to you. Assault, speaking of assault, that very word may be the strategic key for Democrats taking back the White House and maybe even the Senate. If I say to any woman, any mother, the word assault, okay? Let's make the Republican Party the party of assault. We can end on assault weapons, but put up something that I'm talking about. There's something about we start the fight, put that graphic, we start the fight on assault weapons. But it is the party of assault. Assault on healthcare for all, assault on smart gun control, assault on the truth, assault on fair wages, assault on the non-rich, assault on safe elections, assault on the Constitution, assault on racial equality, assault on the free press, on our allies, on the planet, our safety, on women, a fair system, assault, make it the party of assault. Start the fight on assault weapons, but stick them with that word. And on the flip side, put up the Democrats. because I think this is a primal election. It's good versus evil. It's safe, unsafe. The Democrats are the party of protection. Same things. They're protection for health care of all, protection of fair wages, protection of races, protection of the non-rich, protection of assault weapons. So what I'm trying to do for the Democrats, when they go all in on the assault weapons, become the party of protection. Leave kitchen table issues like health care for everybody, like free wages. We are the protectors. They are the assaulters. And I think you can use an assault weapon. We used to have a term in marketing, a halo, as a way of saying that's the party you're unsafe with, and we are the safe party. That's primal, and that's the way we're going to vote.
I wish I'd left a longer piece of the ending in, because when he was done, it was like everybody was just kind of like stunned. What do we say to this? And one of the reasons why is that for some reason, Democrats don't go for the jugular, right? Progressives, Democrats, many times we don't go for the jugular. It is something that I think is something that we're deficient at, and it's something that I think we need to do. Because the truth of the matter is the harm that's being impacted on us by not only Republicans, but in many times centrist Democrats. I'm going to give a good example. But let me first just say, using Texas as the example, Texas has over 1 million people uninsured. We could insure all these people with the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act, and it'll cost Texas next to nothing, right? I mean, that's just a fact. The Republicans don't have a problem in not insuring these people, even though they know many of these people will die for the lack of coverage, they'll get sicker for the lack of coverage, and all these things. I mean, that is what I call antiseptic criminality. Because if you take a look at exactly what's happening, if you take a look at what they're doing, you know, they say, oh, wow, we don't, you know, they look at it from an ideological standpoint. We're not going to spend that kind of a money because it's inefficient, or however they want to look at it or say about it. What they don't say is what the impact of just saying no is about. And that impact is the death of many people. So I honestly consider that murder. And you know, a lot of people get on my case when I say I consider that murder, because are you calling me those people a murder? Yes, I am. I don't want to mix. I'm not sending mixed messages here. If you knowingly effect the death of somebody, you're committing murder. And that's what these politicians up in Austin did when they neglected to allow these people to have health insurance that would save their lives. But we as Democrats don't say that. Progressives many times don't say that. They don't make ads that say, you are killing your constituents. They don't, you know, I was on Tamara Shealy's show earlier this morning, and Ted, I don't remember his last name, is running for Senate in Georgia. So she had the guy who was running for Senate against the guy who's running for Senate. She has the guy who's running for Senate on the show. Great. But here's the kicker. I looked at that guy and I said, let me tell you what you really need to do, my friend. You need to go right there in Georgia. Right there where hospitals are closing because Georgia refused the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act. In rural areas that vote for Republicans who then screw them, you need to stand up there with the cameras and you need to have photo ops there saying, this is what voting for the guy you voted for gave us. The loss of this hospital, and for all of you who died because the hospital to take care of you was too far away, that is the guy who did it. We have to have guerrilla warfare to show people exactly what is happening. The problem is we don't do it in that fashion. And until we learn how to fight the fight, you know, Americans and anybody else, you know, people in general, they want to support people that are going to go out there and fight like hell for them. If the people who are defending you are, I hate to put it this way, right? But if the people who are defending you are Democrats, many times you have to say, Well, are they going to be putting it all out, or are they going to be saying, well, we can't quite say it that way. Oh well, it's that is sort of too graphic. No, uh, that's not who people vote for. People vote for strength. People vote for people they know are going to go out there and fight for them. So I think it's high time in this election period to listen to what Donny Deutsch has to say. The assault weapon, it is simple. The assault weapon ban that these guys don't want to fight for. They're doing nothing to protect the Americans. So then associate them, and I wrote a blog about that today, associate them with assault. Associate the Republican leadership with assault. Assault on your life. Assault on your health. Assault on all these other points. Donny Deutsch is right. For those of you that are just coming, let me play that again one more time because I think it is that important that we have a narrative.
I think, and I want to just move into the next topic because it's related to this. I see the word assault, and I see assault weapons as a symbol to use. Let me go back and I'll come back to you. Assault, speaking of assault, that very word may be the strategic key for Democrats taking back the White House and maybe even the Senate. If I say to any woman, any mother, the word assault, okay? Let's make the Republican Party the party of assault. We can end on assault weapons, but put up something that I'm talking about. There's something about we start the fight, put that graphic, we start the fight on assault weapons. But it is the party of assault. Assault on healthcare for all, assault on smart gun control, assault on the truth, assault on fair wages, assault on the non-rich, assault on safe elections, assault on the Constitution, assault on racial equality, assault on the free press, on our allies, on the planet, our safety, on women, a fair system, assault, make it the party of assault. Start the fight on assault weapons, but stick them with that word. And on the flip side, put up the Democrats. Because I think this is a primal election. It's good versus evil. It's safe, unsafe. The Democrats are the party of protection. Same things. They're protection for health care of all, protection of fair wages, protection of races, protection of the non-rich, protection of assault weapons. So what I'm trying to do for the Democrats, when they go all in on the assault weapons, become the party of protection. Weave kitchen table issues like health care for everybody, like free wages. We are the protectors. They are the assaulters. And I think you can use an assault weapon. We used to have a term in marketing, a halo, as a way of saying that's the party you're unsafe with, and we are the safe party. That's primal, and that's the way women vote.
Absolutely true. I am not fond, again, I must repeat, I am not fond of Donny Deutsch. I think Donny Deutsch many times, again, think about what he said about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. If they are elected, he'll rather vote for Donald Trump. But on this point, Donny Deutsch is 100% correct. And what we have to do as people on the good side, as progressives, as people who are there to help the average American citizen, as people who are there to protect the average American system, just like he said there, we have to come out and say, first of all, we have to inflict the pain on the leaders of the other side. We have to show people that they are criminals on the other side. This isn't just a difference in opinion. You notice when he said it's primal. This is no longer a difference in opinion. These guys' policies kill. These guys' policies maim. These guys' policies pollute. These guys' policies care nothing other than the mighty dollar. Yes, there is a sect within the Democratic Party as well that are more capitalist as well. But that's not look, that's not what we're concerned about. We're concerned of, do you care about people? Do you care about people? Folks, please remember that this is a call-in show, 646-716-5812. I can probably take a couple calls if you decide to call into 646-716-5812. One other thing I want to tell you is that this is a show that needs your support. So please go ahead and go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright, and sign up, subscribe. We do some important work here to move the message forward, to give folks reasons. Give folks reasons to be a part of the body politics so that they'll participate, so that they will feel empowered to go out there and vote. So please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright and subscribe. It's very, very inexpensive, and you will be doing a job because we do this not just every day. We do this right through the day. On Sunday, I'll be going out to speak to some Venezolanos, people from Venezuela, that we're going to be talking about stuff that's going on there. We're going to kind of equate that, mimic that right back to the United States of America. I mean, there's a lot that we have to do to empower our own, to empower people here. The mainstream media is not going to do it for you. Earlier, if you've been with us, you know I had Ted Howard on. Ted Howard is the president and co-founder of the Democracy Collaborative. They are doing important work. They're creating cooperatives and have been people working corporations that they own themselves. And they've been doing a whole lot of positive work. And you never hear about it. You always hear about, oh, we're trying to take. No. That's not the economy we believe in. We believe in a free enterprise economy where everybody has a stake, where everybody works, where everybody has health care, where everybody forms a positive place in society. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't believe in greed. And you know, everybody always say greed pays. People are greedy. That's a natural state of humanity. Greed. If greed was a natural state of humanity, Jeff Bezos would never have been able to accumulate $160 billion. Bill Gates would not have been able to accumulate over $100 billion. The natural state of humanity isn't greed. Those who are greedy take advantage of everybody else. And everybody else doesn't want to be greedy. So let's not, they put all these things in your head. The Powell Manifesto and all of that put a whole bunch into your head to make you believe that there's something worthy that these capitalists are doing by hoarding money and hurting you, by taking what you have worked for. You have worked for all of this, but you don't get to take advantage of your spoils, because as soon as you get a raise, the insurance company takes that money away by raising their fees. They notice the plutocracy takes everything back that they claim to give you. The big tax cut that Donald Trump gave to the wealthy, and he gave a few pittances to the middle class, and then he creates tariffs and we're going to attack China. Oh, so he's going to go for China now, right? He's going to go ahead and build China. No, it's you who are paying that tax. So that tax doesn't go back to China, go anywhere else other than into the coffers to offset the deficit spending from the monies he gave to the rich folk. So that's all it is. The tariffs is just to pay back, take back of the money he gave you. Because remember, the middle class got a tiny bit of money, and they took it right back in two places. Your health care went up. You got tariffs. You got all these things that are occurring to you. Why the hell aren't Democrats really putting it in that simple term? To let folks know that they make believe they're giving you something. They make believe they're giving you relief. But what are they really doing? They take it right back in tariffs and increase healthcare costs and all these other things. And healthcare really didn't go up. The price of insulin didn't really go up. But they want more money for their shareholders, right? And that's where it comes from. So folks, we have to do this right. That is what Politics Done Right is all about. We don't want you to just listen to the stories you hear on MSNBC, CBS, Fox News, or whatever, because they can't tell you the whole story. But we do. We don't owe anything to anybody else other than honesty to you. You are the only person we are indebted to. So please go ahead and consider being subscribers to Politics Done Right, patreon.com/Politics Done Right. We're going to be out of here. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how we end this baby. I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.